5a, 6 lines from the bottom, Ki Asa Ravin. When Ravin arrived, so he issued a final psak, a final ruling about the status of fruits or vegetables that are being brought, that regarding their status of maaser, whether one is permitted to eat from them in a non-permanent fashion, what we call achilas arai. So he said, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, echad Shabbos ve'echad truma ve'echad chatzer ve'echad mekach, kulon in koven ela b'davar shenigma malachtan. So regarding all these halachos that we stated, that Shabbos, when Shabbos arrives, that is automatically considered a kvias on these fruits or vegetables, that from that point onwards, one is not permitted to eat from them, even derech arai, without taking off maaser, truma samaisers, ve'echad truma, or taking off truma, meaning when one began the process of taking off truma to maisrut. So once he begins that process by taking off truma, then he would not be permitted from eating them arai without taking off maaser. Ve'echad chatzer, the halacha is the one when one brings the fruits and vegetables into his home, as soon as he brings them into his courtyard, already he is forbidden from eating from them in any fashion until he takes off maaser. Ve'echad mekach, if they are bought or sold, there too he's forbidden from eating from them, even derech arai, even in the fashion of a snack, without taking off maaser. Kulon in koven ela b'davar shenigra malachtan b'Shabbos. All these halachos only apply nigra malachtan. Sorry, that all these halachos only apply for fruits or vegetables that the work involved in harvesting them has been completed. But if they are not yet complete, there's still more work to be done for their harvest. Then even if he's begun to take off truma, or even if he's brought them into his courtyard, or even Shabbos has arrived, or even if they were bought or sold, there is not yet a kvias for trumot and masrut, and he is permitted to eat from them derech arai in the fashion of a snack if it's not considered a meal. So it says the Gemara, for each one of these statements, the reason why he had to make that statement is because there were differing opinions. There were opinions that argued on this, and therefore he had to issue a ruling. Shabbos la'afukim midahilo. So the reason why he made the statement of Shabbos is to go against the opinion of Hillel. The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Hama'amer peros mimakom lamakom liktzor v'kidesh aleim hayom. If one is transferring the peros from one place to another for liktzor, in order to continue harvesting from one place to another, so he takes them off of one place so he can harvest. So v'kidesh aleim hayom, and Shabbos arrives. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Hillel la'atzma oser. Hillel would forbid it regarding himself, meaning Hillel by himself was the one who forbade these fruits from being eaten, even though others, Rashi says, all the others in his generation permitted it. Nevertheless, Hillel forbade it, and therefore Ravin made this statement in order to disagree, in order to say that the halachic ruling is not like Hillel. Therefore, he stated that Shabbos is not koveya unless all the work has already been done. Going on to 35b at the top, Chatzer la'afuke midrav Yaakov. The statement about the Chatzer, about the courtyard, that the courtyard likewise is not koveya, meaning doesn't make the fruits eaten forbidden. 35b, top. 35b, first word. Chatzer la'afuke midrav Yaakov. The Tan, Rabbi Yaakov says in the Mishnah, Hamavir te'enim v'chatzero liktzos. If one is transferring, he's bringing figs through his courtyard in order to then take them to put them out to dry. So banav ubnei beso ochlin mehen arai ukturin min hamaser. So in the Mishnah it states that if he's bringing it through his courtyard, not for the purpose of now bringing it into his house to eat from them, but rather in order to spread them out and dry them out. So since he's not yet completed the work involved, his household is permitted to eat from them in a non-meal fashion, in a non-permanent fashion, and they're pater from maser. But Tanya alone, we learned to regard this statement of Yaakov Mechayev Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Poter. So Rabbi Yaakov stated that Rabbi Yaakov disagrees, and he says that one is not permitted to eat from them until he takes off maser. Okay? And therefore, Ravin had to make his statement to disagree with the opinion of Rabbi Yaakov. Truma, la'afuke midu Rabbi Eliezer. His statement about Truma, that Truma is not koveya unless all the work has been done, is to take away from the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Titznan, Peros, Shatorman, Achel Nigma Malachtan, fruits where he took off Truma before all the work involved has been done. So Rabbi Eliezer Oser Lecho Mehen Arai, V'Chachamim Matirin. Rabbi Eliezer forbids one from eating from them in any fashion. However, the Chachamim disagree and the Chachamim permit it. So again, Ravin had to make his statement to teach us that the halacha does not follow Rabbi Eliezer. The halacha follows the opinion of the Chacham. Mekach, Kedetnan, Halokech Te'enim, Me'am Haaretz, V'Makom Shero B'nei Adam Dorsin. So if one buys figs from an Am Haaretz, from someone who cannot be trusted to take off maser properly, B'Makom Shero B'nei Adam Dorsin, in a place where most of the people will then use their te'enim, most people use their figs in order for them to be squashed into a fig cake rather than eating them one by one, rather than eating them the way they are. So rather than eating them fresh, people would press them into a cake. So therefore, the work involved has not yet been completed, because when would we say that the work involved in making these figs ready to eat is completed? After they've been pressed into the cake. Right, but at this point, when they're still fresh, the work has not yet been completed. So therefore, ochel mehen arai, he is permitted to continue to eat from them in a fashion that's not a meal, but rather just a snack. Uma'asman demai, and he takes off maaser in the halacha of demai, which is the halacha that applies of maaser. If one buys fruits or vegetables from someone who cannot be trusted to have taken off maaser, so he has to take off maaser again when he buys them, even though, as we'll see in a moment, right, it's only midu abanan, it's only, and it's not even a full drabanan, it's only out of a concern, a suspicion that perhaps they did not take off maaser. It's not the same as a biblical obligation to take off maaser, because in fact, the majority of the people did in fact take off maaser properly. It's only a suspicion that perhaps this person has not, as we'll see in a moment. So, Shma min hatlas is a proof of this, right? Yeah. Well, we're gonna have a lafuke in a minute. In a couple of lines, it's going to say what is lafuke. But here you're right. Here he's agreeing with the statement. So Shma min hatlas. He's teaching us three halachos from the statement. Shma mina mekach ena kovas ela b'davar shenigmar malachta. So number one is teaching us that a sale transaction, buying or selling these figs or any fruit or vegetable, does not obligate one in maaser, meaning does not forbid one from eating from them in a fashion of a snack, unless all the work involved has been done. So if it's bought or sold before that point, then he's still permitted to eat from it, what we call arai. Ushma mina rov amei haaretz ma'asren. It's further teaching us that the majority of the amei haaretz, the majority of people, even though we don't trust them regarding Truma to Maisrot, that's only a suspicion. The majority of them did take off Truma to Maisrot properly. Okay, so the majority of them did. It was only a suspicion that since there exists, right, although it's a minority, it's still a significant minority, right, and there exists a minority that does not take off Truma to Maisrot properly. Therefore, we obligate anyone who buys from them to take off Trumot and Maisrot a second time. Right, but however, that obligation is only midrabanan, and there are many kulos, there are many leniencies that apply because it's only a suspicion. Right, it's not an absolute obligation. It's certainly not the oraisa, the biblical obligation to take off truma to ma'aser. Ushma mina ma'asrin demai me'amei haaretz afilu b'davar shelo nigmar malachto. And furthermore, it's teaching me that from amei haaretz, when one buys from an am haaretz, then from someone again who can't be trusted, then he takes off maaser of demai, even though the all the work involved has not yet been done. So perhaps we would say that that truma and maaseh certainly have not been taken off, right? So we're saying that no, that it only has the status of demai, meaning I might have thought that since all the work involved has not yet been done, so many people don't take off truma and maaseh at that point, right? So, however, the halacha is that one is not permitted to sell, okay, those fruits or vegetables to the unsuspecting consumer, right, without having taken off trumot or maasrot. So I might have thought that when it comes to someone who can't be trusted, right, perhaps then we would have to assume that he's not taking off trumot or maasrot at all, right, and it should be a full obligation. Nevertheless, this mission is teaching me that no, right, since it's forbidden to sell to the consumer without having first taken off trumot or maasrot, then that assumption, we can assume that the seller has taken off trumot or maasrot, even though all the work involved has not yet been finished. Again, that assumption only applies to the majority of people. There still remains that minority that will never take off trumot or maasrot, and therefore the concern of demai still applies. However, it's only a concern of demai. Like we mentioned, there's many leniencies that applied. We're not required to make an absolute assumption that trumot or maasrot have not been taken off.
I think we should have had food label.
Yeah, because we know that you can trust that absolutely, right? So of course, okay. And so this is like you mentioned before. There's a lafuke. He's coming to take away from the opinion. He's coming to counter the opinion that was taught. Hamachlef peiros im chavero. One who barters, he swaps fruits with his friend. Zeh le'echol v'zeh le'echol. That even if they're both trading, regardless of whether they are both trading for the fruits to be eaten immediately, meaning they're trading fruits and vegetables that are ready for immediate consumption, or regardless of whether they are both trading fruits and vegetables that have not yet been completed, they're not yet ready for consumption. For example, they're figs that are going to be pressed into a cake. So regardless of one, perhaps their intentions are different. One is intending to press them into a cake, one is intending to eat them immediately. Regardless of what the purpose is, chayav. That regardless of that purpose, then nevertheless they are immediately obligated in maaser because the transaction has been done. So this opinion states that a transaction, buying or selling them, or even bartering them, right, immediately obligates them in maaser to the point that one is not permitted to eat from them at all without taking off maaser. And therefore, Ravin was coming to counter that opinion. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, lechol chayev liktzos pater. Rabbi Yehuda, however, disagrees, and that's the opinion that Ravin is coming to promote. Is that Rabbi Yehuda says that if they're ready for immediate consumption, right, they're ready to be eaten, all the work has been done, then the sale, right, the sale of those fruits and vegetables will now obligate them immediately in maaser, and he would be forbidden from eating them at all. However, if his purpose is to press them into a cake or do some other work meaning all the work has not yet been completed, then even though a sale has been done, they are not yet completely obligated in maaser, and he is permitted to continue to eat from them in a fashion of a snack, what we call achilas arai, even though a transaction has been done. And that's the opinion that Ravin is in agreement with, and that Ravin is coming to promote here. Okay, we're going to start the new perek. So on the new chapter, Meshilin Peiros. So on 35b, starting the new chapter with the Mishnah, Meshilin Peiros derech aruba b'yom tov, avalo b'shabbos. So the Mishnah is stating that if one has fruits up on his roof for the purpose of drying them out, right, and they're out on his roof and they're drying out in the brilliant sunshine, and it's a beautiful Oregon day, and right, he puts them out in the beautiful sunshine. 5 minutes later, right, he sees the storm clouds rolling in. Okay, so they're not going to do a very good job of drying out on his roof, right? And they're going to get ruined. So the halacha is on Yom Tov, one is permitted now to take those fruits and drop them through a skylight, an aruba, so a hole on his roof that is on the surface of the roof itself. So since it doesn't require a lot of work, there's not a lot of work involved in simply taking the fruit and dropping them through this hole on the roof, he's permitted to do that on Yom Tov, okay, but not on Shabbos. So he's allowed to do this on Yom Tov in order to save his fruits from being ruined. However, on Shabbos, he would not be permitted at all to do that. And the reason is because we're going to see that these fruits or vegetables would be considered, these fruits that are there, since they're for the process of being dried out, right, and not for they're not yet ready to be eaten, they are considered to be muktzah. They're set aside for a different purpose because they're not yet ready. Obviously, food that is ready for consumption, right, is permitted to be moved on Shabbos or Yom Tov, right, because it's food. We're intending to use it. But here, since he's not intending to use it on Shabbos or Yom Tov, right, on that day, because it's not yet ready for consumption, it would be considered muktzah. And normally he would not be permitted to move it at all, right, even for the purpose, even if there's some danger to it. However, here, since there'll be a significant loss because they'll be ruined by the rain, so on Yom Tov, the Chachamim, the sages, permitted him to take them to the hole in the roof and drop them through back into his house. Similarly, one is permitted to drag a tarp and cover over these fruits that are on his roof in order that they should not be ruined from the rain or in any other place. If there's water dripping through the ceiling or something that would ruin them, he's permitted to cover them over. Similarly, if he has open barrels of wine or oil and there's water dripping into them, so he's permitted to cover them with a tarp. And he is likewise permitted to take a bucket and put it under a leak that he has from his roof if it's possibly going to ruin his carpet that's underneath, right? So he's permitted to take a bucket, place it underneath, and we'll see why that's a chiddush. We'll see why the Mishnah needs to teach us that. But the Mishnah is telling us he's permitted to do that on Shabbos, even on Shabbos. So the other cases were permitted so the first case was only permitted on Yom Tov. So to actually transfer the fruits themselves is only permitted on Yom Tov, not on Shabbos. But to take a tarp and cover them, that's permitted even on Shabbos, and to put the bucket under the leak, that's permitted even on Shabbos itself. Okay, the Gemara is going to explain this Mishnah. Itmar, Rav Yehuda, Rav Nasan. So the Gemara's first clarification that the Gemara makes is there were apparently several different versions of the Mishnah itself, particularly the first word of the Mishnah. So the first word of the Mishnah was, in our version, was meshilin, okay, which means to lower them. And apparently there were numerous different versions of the first word of the Mishnah. Some quoted it as, again, as a background, the Mishnah were taught orally, right? And they were taught from teacher to student, from Rebbe to Talmud, and there were several different oral variations of this Mishnah, the way they were taught. So some say it was taught to me with the word meshilin, and others said other words, but as the Gemara is going to explain, they all had the same meaning. So the outcome is going to be the same. There were several different traditions that were quoted regarding the Mishnah. So Rav Yehuda Rav Nasan, Chad Tani Meshilin, Chad Tani Mashchilin. So one taught that it was Meshilin, which is the version that we have, right? And another taught that it was Mashchilin. Amar Mazutra Mandatani Meshilin lo Mishtabesh, or Mandatani Mashchilin lo Mishtabesh. So the one who taught Meshilin, he is not wrong. And the one who taught Mashchilin, he likewise is not wrong. Both of them have the same meaning, which means to lower them. Mandatani Meshilin lo Mishtabesh. That the one who taught that the word is meshilin, that means to lower, because we have a pasuk in the Torah. This is a pasuk in the Tochacha, in the warning given to Klal Yisrael about what will happen if they don't keep the mitzvot properly. And there it states that ki yishal zeisecha, you'll plant, right? You'll plant an orchard of an olive orchard, and you won't get any oil out of it because the olives will fall off your trees. Okay, and the Torah uses the word ki yishal zesecha, the olives will fall off. So you see that yishal, meshilin, means to lower something down, that the olives will fall off the tree. And the one who had the version of mashchilin, he's likewise not wrong, because we have a precedent for where the word mashchilin has been used to lower something. The Tnan, hashachol, hakasul, that this is regarding blemishes in an animal that would make it unfit for being used as a korban, and it says shachol shenishmita yirecho, kasul she'echad meyirechosav gavoa mechaveta. So shachol means that the animal's hip bone has been dislocated from its socket, and it's fallen, and it's fallen out of its rightful place, out of its normal place. So you see that the word shachol means for something to fall. Amar of Nachum by Yitzchak, mandatani meshirin lo mishtabish, mandatani mashchirin lo mishtabish, mandatani manshirin lo mishtabish. So we have several other versions as well. Mandatani meshirin lo mishtabish. The Tznan Rabbi Shmuel Omer Nazir lo yachuf rosho ba'adama mipnei shemeshir es haseir. So meshir can also mean to remove or to fall. Okay, because we learned in the Mishnah that a Nazir, so a Nazir, one who takes the vow of Nazirut, one of the things he's forbidden from doing is cutting his hair. Right, and included in that is any process of hair removal. Included, says the Mishnah, of rubbing earth on his, making a clay mask on his hair, right? Because by doing so, that's going to cause some of the hair to fall out, right? So meshir es haseir, it's causing the hair to fall out, so that's forbidden. But you see that the word meshir, right, means to cause something to fall out, so that too can be used in our Mishnah. The one who uses the word mashchirin, he likewise is not wrong. Titznan hashachor v'hazug shel sfarayim afal pi shenechleku temein. So this is referring to a scissors. Okay, and this is regarding the halachic status of kalim, of utensils, to be makabel tuma, for them to receive ritual impurity. And the halacha is that only a keli, only a utensil that can be used, right, in a normal fashion, accepts ritual impurity. If it's been broken, right, then it cannot become tamei. And the halacha is that a scissors, even though the two parts of the scissors have broken apart, they've been removed from each other. So, like in the scissors that we have nowadays, they are screwed together, right? So there's a top blade, there's a bottom blade, and they're screwed together. So even if that screw has been taken out, right, since you remain with two blades, right, and each blade can be used, right, obviously not as the scissors, but it can be used as a blade, right? You can use it as a letter opener. So since that's the case, therefore, even though it's been taken apart, each half is still makabel tuma, right? But you see that the one of the words for the blade, right, which is being is shachor, right? And the reason for that is because it's raised and lowered. Right, the way a scissors is used is you raise and lower the blade, right? So the lower blade is referred to as shachor, and therefore you see that shachor can mean to lower something. The one who uses the word machirin, he likewise is not wrong. One whose clothing has fallen into water, right, and they've been soaked through on Shabbos. Nevertheless, he's permitted to walk with them. So let's say his shoes have, or some of his robe has fallen into water and it's become soaked through. Nevertheless, he's permitted to wear them on Shabbos, and we do not say that he's required to remove them out of a concern that he'll be squeezing out the water when he's walking, which is what we call schita, which is removing the water. One is not permitted to wring out his clothes on Shabbos. So if he's been walking again in a beautiful Oregon day and he gets caught in a rainstorm, and now his jacket has been soaked through, right? So he's not permitted to wring it out on Shabbos. He's not permitted to squeeze out water from clothing. Nevertheless, he's permitted to keep walking, right? He's even while his clothing has been soaked through, he's permitted to keep walking, and we don't say that in that case he is squeezing out the water from his clothing. And you see the reason why we're quoting this again is because we use the word nashru, which means they fell into the water, and therefore it means the halacha of falling. It means the word can be used for falling or lowering something down. Okay. Inami, a different proof can be used. Mehadetnan ezehu leket hanosher b'shas kitzira. Another example of a case where we use the word nosher for something to fall down is from the halacha of leket. So there's a halacha regarding matnos aniyim. There are certain, when a farmer is harvesting his field, there are certain parts of it that have to be left for the poor. One of those is there's peah, which is a corner of the field, right? There's shikha, which is bundles that have been forgotten in the field. And another one is leket, that when they're harvesting, so they would grab a handful of wheat and use the sickle to harvest that handful of wheat. And sometimes they're holding that handful and one or two stalks will fall down, will fall out of their hand, will slip out of their grasp and fall to the ground. So that is what we call leket. And the Torah says that the farmer may not reach down and pick them up and take them back. He has to leave them for the poor. Okay? So the Mishnah says its description of what is leket. It says what was nosher, hanosher b'shas ketzira, what fell down while he was harvesting. So you see that he uses the word nosher for falling down, for something to be lowered. So therefore, all these variations of the wording of the Mishnah are valid because they all have the same outcome. Ultimately, they all mean the same thing. They all mean to lower down the fruits, to throw down the fruits from the roof, that he's permitted to take them from his roof and put them and lower them back into his house. And that's permitted on Yom Tov because he's saving them from being ruined, but it's not permitted on Shabbos. Okay, so now now that we resolved the wording of the Mishnah, so the Gemara is going to actually explain the halacha of the Mishnah. So Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Meshilin Peiros Derech Aruba b'Yom Tov. So one is permitted to lower the fruits through the skylight, through the opening on Yom Tov. Ad kama, okay. Ad kama, how much? Until what point is he permitted to at what point is he permitted to lower them? To the point that we say that it is not what we call a tircha yasera. So the Chachamim permitted him to do a certain amount of work on Yom Tov in order to save his fruits from being ruined. Right? However, at a certain extent, at a certain point, the Chachamim did not permit him to go through an extensive amount of work, even though the fruits will get ruined. However, the Chachamim only permitted him to a certain extent, not beyond that extent. So what is the extent of the amount of effort involved that the Chachamim permitted? And at what point did the Chachamim say that that is too much effort and it would be forbidden? Amar of Zera, Amar of Asi. Rav Zera said in the name of Rav Asi, V'Amrila, Amar of Asi, Amar of Yochanan. Some say it was Rav Asi in the name of Rav Yochanan. Ki osa sheshaninu, like we learned in another place, Mipnei Arba v'Chamesh Kupos Shel Teven v'Shel Tevua Mipnei Haorchim u'Mipnei Bitul Beis Hamedrash. That we learned in a different place that one is permitted to move 4 or 5 bales of hay or sacks of grain in order to make a place for guests to sit on, so they could sit on these bales of hay, right, or these sacks of grain. So if he has guests and he doesn't have enough chairs, right, so he can bring in sacks of grain or bales of hay, right? I do this all the time. When I have guests in my dining room, I bring in bales of hay for them to sit on, right? But that was a normal way of making seats for guests. So he's permitted to do that on Yom Tov in order to make place for his guests to sit. Or, for example, if they're teaching in the Beis Medrash and there are many students that come and there's not enough seats for the students to sit and learn, so he's permitted to bring 4 or 5 bales of hay in order to make place for the students to learn Torah.
But not more.
But not more than that.
Not more than 5.
Right, exactly. So 4 or 5 beyond that is considered to be an extensive amount of work, and we didn't permit it. So that's exactly the point that we're bringing here. Just like there was permitted up to 4 or 5 sacks of grain or bales of hay, so here too we're going to be permitted to bring to take in about 4 or 5, let's say, handfuls or bucketfuls of fruit, but not beyond that. Okay, so that's exactly the point that we're bringing here. Just like there, 4 or 5 was permitted, here too, 4 or 5 would be permitted, and not more than that. So the Gemara questions this. Vidilma, perhaps, Shani Hassam, there the halacha is different. The reason why we permitted up to 4 or 5 bales of hay or sacks of grain is only because the Ika Bitul Beis HaMedrash. Because if we didn't permit it, right, then people would be unable to come and learn Torah. Right, so there would be what we call bitul beis hamedrash, that we would lose out on the study of Torah. So perhaps that's why the Chachamim permitted the amount of 4 or 5 bundles of grain. But maybe when it comes to just saving, right, his own personal possessions, his own personal food, perhaps the Chachamim did not permit that much. Right, perhaps it's a lesser amount. But here, when it doesn't come to the study of Torah, it's only about saving his foods. So then maybe only a lesser amount and not that amount. Inami, or alternatively, we can question Hasam hainu taima da arba v'chamesh kupos shari mishum Shabbos de chamira lo asil zilzulebe. That there we permitted such a large amount of 4 or 5 bales of hay because there that halacha was taught regarding Shabbos, that it's even permitted to do this on Shabbos, right? So on Shabbos is very chamor, right? Shabbos is very stringent, right? One who violates Shabbos is liable for the death penalty. So nobody is coming to be mezalzel. Nobody's going to make light of the isurim of Shabbos. Everybody takes it very seriously. So even though the Chachamim are permitting you to move these bales of hay, we don't have to worry that people are going to come to do other malacha, right, on Shabbos because of the fact that the Chacham permitted this. But on Yom Tov is only a lav, right? Yom Tov does not carry the death penalty or even excommunication. It's only a lav. It's only a mitzvah lo saseh, right, a negative commandment. Okay, but it doesn't carry significant punishment. So therefore, we might have to be concerned. Avol Yom Tov the kil Yom Tov, which is much more lenient, right? It doesn't carry a significant punishment in Bezdin. And therefore, we have to be concerned that if we permit a person to take his fruits and bring them inside from his roof, perhaps they'll come to do other malacha, which is forbidden on Yom Tov. So perhaps there, I would say that the Chacham will not permit him to move the fruits at all. Right, so it's somewhat counterintuitive. We'd permit it on Shabbos, which is more stringent, right? But we would forbid it on Yom Tov, which is less stringent, which is more lenient. But it makes sense because the Chacham have a concern that we have to apply a greater stringency to Yom Tov out of a concern that people might come to make light of the halachos of Yom Tov. Or perhaps I can pose the question in the opposite direction, meaning we pose 2 questions to state that even though he's permitted to bring 4 or 5 bales on Shabbos, right, that perhaps he would not be permitted to do so on Yom Tov, or maybe only a lesser amount. Now I can pose the question the opposite way. Perhaps on Yom Tov, a larger amount should be forbidden. Hasam hainu taima the leka hefsid mama. There on Shabbos, we permitted 4 or 5 bales, right? Perhaps that was the maximum, that was the cutoff, because there's no loss of money involved, right? Why does he want to bring those bales of hay? Right, to make a seat for his guests, right, or to bring seats for the students to learn Torah, right? There's no loss of money involved, right? It's out of convenience, right? So there, perhaps the Chachamim put a cutoff of 4 or 5 bales, right? Because they said we're not going to permit more than that, again, because there's no big loss involved. But here, aval hacha the ika hefsid mamon filu tuva nami. But here, that we're talking about his fruits being ruined, right? And there's a significant loss of money. Then perhaps even a larger amount should be permitted, right? So how did you draw this parallel between Yom Tov and Shabbos from moving the bales of hay to make seats to apply that halacha to saving his fruits, right? Going on to 36a at the very top. Hasam Tanan. There we learned. So this is a different question now. So the Gemara left off with those questions. We at this moment we leave them unanswered. That perhaps the parallel that we're drawing between moving the bales of hay on Shabbos, right, and we're applying that halacha to saving his fruits from the roof on Yom Tov, perhaps that parallel is incorrect, right? And we can't apply that halacha. Perhaps Yom Tov should be a lesser amount, or perhaps Yom Tov should be a larger amount, right? But either way, we're saying that the comparison, right, is not correct. So Hasam Tanan, we learned a different halacha avaloes ha'otzar, that when it comes to moving these bales of hay, right, he is permitted to move 4 or 5 bales, but not to move the entire storage amount, right? Not to move the entire amount that he has stored. Now, what does that mean? Amar Shmuel, my avaloes ha'otzar. What does it mean not to move the entire amount that he has stored, right? Well, if we already capped it at 4 or 5, so obviously he's not allowed to empty his storage room. So what does it mean? So what it means is avalo yigmor es ha'otzar kulo, that he is not permitted to completely empty the storage space. So even if he has only 4 or 5 bales left, right, and 4 or 5 bales should be permitted, here he would not be permitted to bring those, because we're concerned that if he completely empties the storage space, that he is going to then want to sweep it out, to sweep it clean, right? To remove any hay that fell out and got left over, or any grain that fell out. And sweeping an earthen floor on Shabbos is forbidden, because he is, by sweeping it, he is going to be mashve gumos, right? He's going to sweep the dirt and flatten it, right? And fill in any holes that are, or any imperfections that are on the floor. And that's mashve gumos, that's filling in holes, which is forbidden on Shabbos. So Dilma asu lashvuya gumos, again, because he's going to fill in the holes. Hachamai hasam hu b'Shabbos the asur mishum dechamer. So what is the halacha here, right? If we're saying that he is going to move the fruits, is he allowed to be permitted to move all of them? So let's say he only has 4 or 5 buckets worth of fruit that he's going to carry in. Is he permitted to move all of them? So do we say that hasam hu b'Shabbos the asur mishum dechamer? Perhaps, right, the reason why it's forbidden there to empty out the entire storage space is because it's Shabbos, right? And Shabbos is very stringent, right? If he would come to sweep the floor and fill in those holes, right, and even out the floor, he's violating an Isur of Shabbos, which is very stringent, right? It carries the death penalty if it were to be done deliberately, right? So even if he's going to do it unintentionally, right, it's something which is very stringent. So therefore, the sages were very concerned about it. So therefore, they did not allow him to empty out the storage space, right? But perhaps on Yom Tov, we would allow him to empty all the fruits, remove all the fruits from his roof, right? Because even if, God forbid, he were to come to violate, to sweep the roof, right, and smooth it out, it's only an issur of Yom Tov, right? It's only a lav, it's only a negative commandment, right? It's not something which carries the death penalty like Shabbos, right? So Yom Tov the kill shapir dami, but Yom Tov, which is much more lenient, right? It doesn't carry a death penalty. So there, the Chachamim, right, did not have to enact. The Chachamim did not have to enact further prohibitions. They didn't have to, out of a concern that he might come to violate Yom Tov, because it's not as stringent. O Dilma, or perhaps I can state the opposite. Hasam de ikabitul beis hamedrash amrit lo. That there, in the case of removing the bales of bringing the bales of hay in order to provide seating, right, for the students to learn Torah, right, which obviously learning Torah has tremendous significance, right, and it's of great importance. And nevertheless, even though it's important, we forbade him from emptying out the entire storage space out of a concern that he might come to violate Shabbos, right? So certainly, right, and there we forbade it. Hacha deleka bitol beis hamedrash lo kol sheken, right? Here, where it's for the purpose of saving his fruits, it's for his own personal purposes. It's not for the sake of learning Torah, right? So kol sheken, all the more so would we say that here it's forbidden as well. right? So again, the Gemara is offering two possibilities. One possibility is that on Yom Tov it would be permitted. The other possibility is that Kol Shekain on Yom Tov would certainly be forbidden. Okay, so again, the Gemara is questioning: can we draw a parallel? Right? Can we draw a comparison from the halacha that was stated by Shabbos to Yom Tov, or perhaps Yom Tov is different? V'hacha Tanan. Here we learned Mashilin Peros Derech Aruba b'Yom Tov. Now again, we learned here in this Mishnah that one is permitted to lower the fruits through the skylight on Yom Tov. V'amar Rav Nachman lo shanu ela ba'oso hagag. That Rav Nachman stated that it's only permitted on the same roof itself, meaning on his roof, right? He is permitted to lower those fruits right through the skylight, right? Because there's a minimal amount of effort involved. Okay. However, let's say he doesn't have the skylight, right, or he can't get them through his, so he's not permitted to carry them over to his neighbor's roof, right, and drop them through the skylight over there, right? Or even if he has more than one building that he owns, he's not permitted to carry them to a different building and drop them through that skylight, because that already is too much effort involved, and the Chacham did not permit it, right? V'tanya nami hachim, we learned similarly in a brisa, ein metaltalin migag lagag. We're not allowed to carry the fruits from one roof to another. Afilu kishegago sehen shavin, even if the roofs are all on one level, they're all flat, they're all on one level, right? He doesn't have to carry them up a ladder, right, or down a ladder. He doesn't have to transfer them to a different level, right? Even though it's flat, right? So it's a minimal amount of effort, right? He doesn't have to go up or down. Nevertheless, it's still forbidden. Okay. So Hasamai, what is halacha regarding Shabbos? Do we say that he's permitted to bring these bales of hay, right, only when there's a minimal amount of effort involved, right, when he doesn't have to carry them up or down, right? So is it the same or not? Hacha da asur mishum yom tov dikil va'asil zulzulebe. So do we say that the reason why the Chacham only permitted, right, on his roof, right, on the immediate roof, the immediate skylight, but not to transfer it to a different roof, perhaps that was on Yom Tov, right? Like we stated earlier, because Yom Tov is not such a stringent prohibition, and the Chacham were concerned if we permit an extensive amount of effort, he may come to be mezalzel, to make light of the prohibitions of Yom Tov, and therefore the Chacham were stringent about what they allowed on Yom Tov, and they only permitted that roof, but not to transfer it to a different roof, right? But perhaps on Shabbos, right? Aval Shabbos the Chamira, v'lo asil zilzulebe, but Shabbos, which is very stringent, right? And therefore, we don't have to be concerned that a person is going to make light of the Isurim of Shabbos. So there, the Chacham would permit even a larger amount. Shapir dami, perhaps the Chacham would permit even to carry it up a level or down a level. Odilma, or perhaps ma hacha the ika hefsid peros amrit lo hasam deleka hefsid peros lo kol shekain. Or perhaps we might state that the opposite, right? If here, where there's a significant monetary loss involved, nevertheless the Chacham did not permit him to carry it up a level or down a level, or even to transfer it to a different roof, even if it's on the same level, right? So certainly on Shabbos, where it comes to transferring the bales of hay simply to provide seating, right? Kol shekain, all the more so that the Chacham would not permit him to bring it from one place to another, right, or up a level or down a level. Certainly, it would be forbidden as well. Okay, we'll pause here for today. Okay, everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day.